everyone, and welcome back to the Comfort Book Club. I've been really looking forward to discussing September's choice, which was Bookworm with Lucy Mangan. As always, my mum Donna has joined me.
Hello everyone.
I hope you've all got a cup of tea to
Definitely.
hand or your favourite beverage to enjoy a cosy book chat with us. Thank you so much to the Comfort Book Club readers who sent in a voice message to add to our discussion. We had 2 readers from Italy this time, and we'll include their messages at the end of our chat. But it was so much fun to return to Bookworm, wasn't it?
It was actually wonderful. I had read it obviously at the same time as you when it first came out and absolutely fell in love with this book.
Yes, me too. Yeah, I first read it in 2018.
Gosh, it was that long ago.
Yeah, that's when it first came out, and had remembered how much I enjoyed it. But it was really fun to return to it again. Lucy Mangan is such a funny writer, isn't she?
She really is, and I think it really captures her voice. She writes in her own voice to me with this, but the humour is there.
Yeah.
Just the way she is. I love that about it.
Yeah, she's a very expressive writer, and I enjoy that as well. And I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to pick this as a Comfort Book Club choice is because for me, children's books are always some of my greatest comfort reads. I know that's true for you too.
Absolutely. I think there's nothing like the books that you discovered in childhood, or indeed if you came to them as an adult and loved them. You can go back again and again and see different things.
Yeah, and Lucy's book is a real ode to childhood reading, to the books that built her essentially, and that turned her into a bookworm. And her book is really a memoir that is addressed to other bookworms, which obviously we definitely
We're
are.
Obviously the target audience here, which I think is really clear, because Miranda and I are like, oh yes, remember this one, and we're nodding along with her over some of her joys, from childhood reading.
So it's a lovely memoir in that way. I mean, I love all books about books, but this one I found especially appealing because it is specifically about childhood reading. And I was such a huge reader as a child. That's a gift that you really passed on to me, was a love for books from a young age. And I really enjoyed how Lucy started with the picture books.
I love that
she remembered from before she could even read. She still loved books.
Yes.
And I feel exactly the same way. Like Shirley Hughes and Judith Kerr and the Hungry Caterpillar
ones too.
Yeah, Janet Helen Albert. I know so many favourites of hers that are real favourites of mine. You feel those books are just in your bones somehow.
I think because I read them to you and shared them with you, even though obviously my books were a lot earlier. And she does mention some because of the Ladybird. She was looking at them for the later readers, but of course they had many for early. Like when you're sort of 2 to 4, that sort of age, which were part of my childhood, which again I passed on to you as well, and so it was really lovely.
Yes.
I think any book that you share as a teacher, to a family member, just even reading it to yourself and talking about it to a friend, there's so much value in it, and she captures all that in this book.
Yes, she does. So I love that it starts from even before the age at which she could read, but then once she learnt how to read, it was like this whole new wonderful world opened up for her. And I certainly share those feelings of remembering. I don't remember exactly how I came to learn to read. I only remember suddenly being able to do it.
Well,
and loving it.
You certainly were like her. I think you read whole work. You just you'd been read to enough. You just began to recite
I memorised picture books when I was little, and read them. Like age 2 or something. But then from very early on, I could read myself.
Could read without me having read to you first. So it just shows that you just were absorbed by books, I think. One strange thing about some of Lucy's choices that I found very interesting is she says right out, she had a thing which she feels now was great loss, that she didn't like animals dressed up. So she missed out on the Beatrix Potter and
Yes.
you know, the Bramley Hedge books and
Yes.
things like that, which is a real pity. And I can tell she thinks it's a real pity.
Yeah,
now
she said,
too.
"Oh, I was such an idiot. Why did I make this?"
But she did come to them
nonsensical
later
rule.
with Wind in the Woods. But children do this, you know, they
Yeah.
get, and you've just got to let them do it. I remember that. I remember when you were like, I don't want it to be about old things, which is really hilarious now because you read so much historical fiction
Yes.
and things and
Yeah.
non-fiction too.
Yeah.
But you know, I just sort of, I love historical fiction and non-fiction, so I was like, oh, okay, you know. But they were on the shelf so that
Yes.
when the time came, you could choose them.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I have to say, Lucy reminds me a lot of you as a reader, in that Mum is someone who can just tune out the whole world as soon as she picks up a book. I mean, we were recently on the train together and someone was taken ill on the train. So
feel
there were
really
all
guilty
these
about this.
announcements going off, you know, calling for a doctor or nurse if anyone was one. And then we had to stop at the next station, and, you know, they explained why we were being delayed for a bit was to get assistance to whoever had been taken ill. And, you know, I turned to Mum and was like, oh, you know, we're having to stop for a while. And you sort of came out of your haze of reading. You'd not heard any of it. And that's just so like you.
I do that all the time. It can be very irritating. My poor mum, who wasn't a great reader, and in fact Lucy's mum reminded me of Nanny.
Yes,
and
Nanny
she
was a doer as well. Would never just sit down and read a book.
No, I must have tried her very much indeed, and I could see her like sort of being very much like, oh, we have to have some time when you've not actually got your head in a book and you need to get fresh air and this type of thing. But she gave up just like Lucy's
Mum did. Yeah. Yes, Lucy shares that ability to just pick up a book and be completely lost to anything else.
She says sadly, with her son being so young in her life, she finds it really hard now. Now, I think because you were also a real bookworm for very young, we'd both sit there with our books, and I would still lose myself. So I haven't lost it, which maybe Lucy will gain it back, which would be lovely for her. But you have that to a certain, not like I do.
Not like you do. I mean, if you know, something goes off, then
probably
alarms or whatever. Fortunately, I'll hear it.
That's probably why you do. I'm probably a nightmare to live with, actually. But yes, that's true.
Self-protective.
It's like the number of times I've put on eggs in the morning, and it's Miranda who goes and takes them off and does that, because they could boil dry for all I know if I'm sitting there with a book.
But one of the reasons I adored Bookworm is because so many of the books Lucy talks about, especially right up until about her young adult years. I read so many of the same ones. I think we diverged there. I never got into Sweet Valley High, and some of the ones she talked about, I just didn't know. I think some of the British ones,
and some of the American. I never read Judy Blume. They probably were known, but I just hadn't read them myself, and I don't. Did you read any of those?
I did read some Judy Blume, but I didn't actually like them that much. I wasn't a big Judy Blume fan when I was young.
No.
So I kind of diverged from her there. But all the books beforehand, she mentions so many ones that I read and adored as a child too. I mean, I certainly had my Enid Blyton phase, and I think she writes really well about Enid Blyton.
I think that's one of the strongest chapters. She explains the appeal.
Yeah.
I mean, you came to them and I came to them younger. So because we were early readers, we were reading those between the age of, I would say we were over them by 5.5, 6.
The famous 5, and I think I'd read all the Mallory Towers, Secrets, all of those by 7 or 8. Because I remember around then needing to kind of move on to other books and find other ones.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, I definitely went through my Enid Blyton reading years. I loved pony books when I was little too, like the Jackie ones by Judith Beresford and the Jill books.
Yeah.
And I loved ones like Tom's Midnight Garden that she raves about, and Goodnight, Mr. Tom. I remember just adoring that book. So I think that's one of the pleasures that I'm sure all our audience understands, is when you connect, even if it's just through a book, but you connect with someone else who has loved the same books that you loved when you were a child and still love in many ways. I mean, Tom's Midnight Garden is one I return to, just like she does.
And when you were reading them, I, of course, we had the paperbacks, and once you finished one, you'd be like, Mum, you have to read this. Yes. And I'd read it myself as a child, but because you were so eager, it was such a joy to come back to it again and read it again. And
that's been such a joy that we've always shared, which is so nice, because even if I didn't always have friends my own age who read the same books, unlike Lucy, I had someone I could share my real love of books with, because you would always read ones I wanted you to read, and then we could talk about them. And I also had a lot of bookish pen pals when I was young, and I would write to people all over the world about the books that I loved. And later, she talks about getting a friend who also liked reading, but it wasn't until she was in her teen years that she actually had that, had someone that she could share a love of books with. And it made me realise, I was always so lucky, because we always had each other.
We did, and like your dad loved the Phantom Tollbooth and introduced you to that.
Yes,
and
he read
the
that
Hobbit.
one to me.
Mind you,
and
like
the Hobbit.
Like you, I mean, you've got your reservations on, like Lucy. You've got your reservations on the sort of fantasy. She's obviously not a huge fantasy.
No, and neither am I.
Yeah.
Although I will read some fantasy. Yeah. And, Philip Pullman, all those books came out in my childhood. The Northern Lights trilogy, and I just loved those. So some of them that obviously she was too old for, but
she probably read them later. I bet she's reading. Read them in her 20s.
But yes, I think that's an interesting point, is that the pleasures of being a bookworm, it is something that you can enjoy all by yourself. It's a solitary thing that means you're never lonely, I think, when you're with a book, which is wonderful. But also there's a real celebration in finding other bookworms and connecting through a love of books, a shared love of reading. And that comes into her book at the end.
It really does, doesn't it? How she moved into that, and her hopes and aspirations for her own son. One of the things I wanted, because this is 2018, I keep thinking, well, he was 6 then, so now he'd be 12. I wonder if, because she's at that point a little bit nervous that he might not turn into a bookworm in a way. She's like sort of hoping he'll be a real reader, but she's not sure. I hope for her sake too. She's got that. But
and I love how she obviously is a collector or a completist. She talks about being a completist and how hard that can be sometimes. For instance, in collecting all of the Just William books by Richmal Crompton, but she was like, us completists just learn to deal with it and get on with it. And I had real sympathy for that.
Your whole childhood trying to gradually get the Just William, the Chalet
all the Chalet books, and it was a real endeavour, because this was before the days of easy ordering of books online. So it took real dedication, didn't it? And years. It took years to actually be able to acquire the books.
It was so exciting. One of the books she talks about, which most people I think probably nowadays haven't read, but because it's so old, but there was I think they were republished in the 80s, the Dimsey ones.
Oh yes, by Dorita Fairley Bruce.
And she herself obviously read them all, or almost all, but you certainly have them all and read them all, that you loved them.
Yeah.
And then I read them. Those were ones I'd missed in my childhood.
Yes.
Miranda was so enthusiastic, and I love them still. Yeah. But it's so nice because, of course, like Antonia Forrest, she has a whole sort of bit about that.
Yes, she does.
She really was grateful to Girls Gone By.
Yes, for republishing books like the Antonia Forrest books. And
Chalet.
I mean, she specifically talked about End of Term. This was the first Antonia Forrest
Must have been
book
that
she read.
edition, the
This edition,
beiges.
she talked about what a bleak sort of cover it was, which meant she didn't pick it off her shelf for a long time. Her dad had bought it for her. I love the way his dad bought her a book almost every week. So on a Saturday morning, she'd go down for breakfast and find a book by her breakfast bowl, and I thought that was so touching. I loved that. But when she finally did read this, she absolutely loved it. And it's true that the cover's a bit sort of grim looking, although I don't think the original is very much better. The original is on the Girls Gone By edition.
But she talked about how tunic was a word she didn't know, a school tunic.
True. It certainly does show those.
Yeah, school uniform in those days was very different,
yes,
you realise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yes, I loved how she read some of the same sort of boarding school stories that I did when I was young, and she really praises Antonia Forrest especially, but she liked the Dimsey books too. And I loved the bit where, as a university student, she goes to the haunted bookshop in Cambridge.
Yes, which
and
we did this
buys
summer.
some Dimsey, and I showcased the haunted bookshop when we went to Cambridge in the summertime on my YouTube channel. And it is this amazing secondhand bookshop that sells a lot of vintage children's books. And I really loved coming across that nod to it again in
it was
Bookworm.
lovely.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. And there were some books that she talked about that I had never read.
No, me too.
And made me really want to read. I mean, one I'd actually bought after I first read this in 2018, and I still haven't read it, so I really must. I have actually started it now.
Yeah.
And that's Private Keep Out by Gwen Grant. And it just sounds really funny, and it's one of Lucy Mangan's very favourite books. So I'm definitely going to read it now. And I
Absolutely, I'll read it after you.
Seeing what I think of it. I'd never had heard of it before.
No, I don't know. We must have just missed that one because we were in the wrong country when that came out, I suspect.
Yes.
And, we didn't see it and didn't hear of it.
Yes.
So,
but I loved how she did acquire her books and discover books too. It was a real mix because she got books through ones her dad got her, and he sometimes bought her books that she asked for, that she knew she wanted. But I think quite often he picked out books that he thought she would like, or he shared a sort of a favourite of his from his own childhood, which was lovely. Some books she also got through reading the books owned by the neighbour's daughter next door.
Yes.
So sort of found books that way. Other books she got through the library, the local library, and also the school library.
School library was incredibly important to her, and you realise, that's often missing now in schools, isn't it? They don't have the school library that they used to.
Yeah, so certainly not as big as they used to be.
That's true.
And I found that really interesting too, how she managed to discover books, because as she talks, as she says too, it was the sort of dark ages of pre-internet. So, you did rely a lot as well on just what you could find within your local environment.
Absolutely. And I remember when she got she won something at school, a prize.
Yes.
And she had a book voucher, and she went and got the sort of two missing Just William books that she was, the ones that she was missing in her collection, and how excited she was about that. And I think I really felt for her with that too.
Yeah, and then her parents were like, you should have bought like a sort of special book, like a nice hardback or something to mark the occasion.
And she was like, they didn't understand.
No.
The completist in her was so excited to do this.
And then I loved the way her grandmothers were important too, and real figures again in actually encouraging her love of reading. They bought her books as well, and one bought her a beautiful edition of Little Women, and that led to her understanding and discovery of classic books and what classic literature means.
And the importance of learning how linguistically languages change by time, by location, so that she she gave an example. Can you remember what it was? I escaped, but how one word
like March Pain.
March
I remember
Pain
she talked
in one
about
of
that sort of
yes,
old-fashioned word for
Rumagodden,
marzipan, Rumagodden.
yeah,
Made me
Rumagodden.
want to read A Doll's House by Rumagodden again.
Yeah,
yes.
me too. Yeah. Isn't it great when it makes you go back and want to pick them
There
up
were other
again?
words too, though,
Yes.
that now I can't remember what the others
Atalanta,
were.
which I think was from Little Women.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yeah. And I thought that was fascinating how she had to go look and she picks them. And it was interesting to me how she felt some things when she didn't get the right way in as a child. She's found it that she's never got so interested in, like maybe the mythology.
The information hasn't stuck as
no,
well.
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And she wishes she maybe met some books like earlier that she would have liked and then gone on to read, more sort of adult or more different examples of them. She talks about those Roger Green puffins, like
which
legends
I've never read those. I don't think. I think you read.
Yes,
them.
I certainly read them, and you had them, but you might have been going through your stage of not wanting to read.
Maybe a bit too old in my in my idea of knights and dragons. So I don't remember ever being so excited about.
King Arthur didn't get to you when you were young, whereas I loved them all.
Yes. But something else I did really enjoy is she talks about the benefits of being a bookworm. Yes. I mean, she also laughs at herself too.
She's got a great
sense of humour, and she laughs at herself a lot in the book about how she had to be prodded to go outside. And really would just spend all the time that she could reading
and be perfectly happy.
Yes. But she also has some wonderful arguments for being a reader and why it's so important to introduce children to books and to hope that they will be readers. And I really loved those aspects of the book too. It's a celebration of having a rich reading life and what that does to you.
Mm-hmm. To you.
Yeah, empathy, understanding, changing your perspective, broadening your world in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So it's a real ode to a love of literature as well as being a kind of just very personal memoir.
Yeah.
I also feel that aspect is such a universal experience to any reader. We all understand those benefits.
I think how much harder it must be now as parents, if you have young children, to give them the time and space to read. I think even as a teacher, some of the books that were read by her teachers in sort of story time meant so much to her, and she was always like dying to buy the book once the teacher.
And also just dying to have the story getting so cross with any of the other students who were naughty or like delay or shorten the reading time they got at the end of the day. And I remember that. My school years, just really wanting to go on with the story. But yes, you're right. Teachers were also adult figures in her life who introduced her to some wonderful books like Tom's Midnight Garden.
Yes.
Although I really sympathised with a bit when I can't remember what the book was now, but she was reading something and loving it, and one of her teachers kept saying, "Oh, that looks like a really interesting book." And Lucy was like, "Oh yes, it's wonderful." And she lent it to the teacher. And she said, and then the book just sat on her desk for weeks. And I couldn't understand how she couldn't read it straight away. And then she finally read it and said, "Oh yes, it was nice," and just gave it back to me. And she felt quite deflated. And I remember, I think, was it in grade 2? I think it was grade 2.
No, it must have.
It was a bit older.
In Long Island.
It was in Long Island. That's right. So it must have been like grade 6.
Yes, you tried the school there for, to see if you would enjoy it.
Yes.
Because Miranda had been homeschooled the last years, and I said, "Well, try it because maybe you'll like this local school."
Yeah. No, I didn't. I mean, in the brief period I was in school, I learned that my English teacher also loved Philip Pullman, and I had the second book in the series, which I'd read and loved, and I lent it to her, and she never gave it back.
I think she lost it.
She lost it, that's right. She told me she
Yeah.
lost it. It was the
Yeah.
first edition.
I
I'm still a little resentful now.
Well, yes, I mean, it's hard to lend out books, isn't it?
That was one of my early lessons in never ever lend your books
well, not
to
a hardcover anyway. You got to that stage really quickly.
Yes. But yes, my own childhood disappointment came back to me.
I can imagine that.
I read that bit in her. But yes, I did really enjoy returning to it.
I really
again.
envied her at the end. She has over 10,000 books then, so I'm sure she's over 15,000 by now,
Yeah.
because her husband is also a big reader.
Yeah.
And she said that, they're not beautiful, immaculate editions, but they're really books that she's loved and wants to have. And that's where I felt a real pang, because she had her childhood books.
Yes.
And we have recovered many of yours and my
some I
childhood
still
books.
have from my
Yes,
childhood.
yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think I have any
No,
from
you
mine.
don't.
So,
Yeah.
moving is often something that goes. But it does make me think as a parent, I'm glad I kept good records of what books Miranda loved and what, this is something that you don't think of until later. And, for all parents, I don't think you would have really been very happy if you had, not known what a name. In fact, that was a good example, the Wind Boy.
Oh, right.
When we
I
lost
know,
the name
I
of
know.
one. And, oh, gosh,
Yes.
thank goodness I finally remembered.
Yes. But yes, and finally, I think what I wanted to say about this book was that I do love that it's a real celebration of children's literature. I mean, for both of us, we both believe in the importance of children's books, and also the joy in reading children's books as an adult too, and that so many of them really can be enjoyed by adults.
Absolutely.
And the particular comfort and satisfaction that you get to returning to books of your childhood, but also to discovering new child classics is wonderful. I think that's such a big part of comfort reading.
The explosion in beautiful picture books is something that, certainly happened after my childhood, and it's been amazing to see. Really, it's like artwork, so many of the illustrations now.
Yeah. But anyway, let's hear from some of the Comfort Book Club readers now. So the first message is from Raluca in Italy. So let's hear what Raluca has to say.
Hello Miranda, my name is Raluca and I'm sending you this message from Italy, Tuscany to be more precise. I've been living here for more than 15 years. I just wanted to say how much I loved reading Bookworm by Lucy Mangan this month. It was such a delightful and nostalgic read. Mangan really captured the magic of childhood and the love for books in such a relatable way. It brought back so many memories of my own early reading experiences, from discovering new books, new world in books, to the feeling of getting lost in stories for hours on end. What really stood out for me was how she highlighted the powerful connection between books and identity. It's amazing to think about how much the stories we read as children shape who we are as adults. Mangan's reflections on that really hit home for me. I found myself remembering specific books that left a lasting impact on me and shaped the way I see the world today. I also loved how she wove in a bit of humor and reflection, making it feel both light-hearted and meaningful. It's one of those books that reminds you why you fell in love with reading in the first place. Thanks so much for choosing it. It was the perfect pick for September. Can't wait to see your video discussion. See you soon.
Oh, thank you, Raluca.
Yes, thank you, Raluca. That was absolutely fabulous.
Yes, and so glad you enjoyed the book. And yes, I think it's so true that Lucy Mangan did an amazing job on capturing the magic of reading in your childhood too. Like you said, how it builds your identity, who you are as a person. And also I loved the way that she talked about that specific magic of reading as a child that you maybe never really get again as an adult. Like as a child, you really can become almost one with a book and like forget about everything else and truly enter that world. And I think that is very true. That's a special quality of reading as a child that you lose as you become an adult. So I love that she captured the magic of specific childhood reading too.
Yes. Yeah, it was wonderful.
But thank you so much for your message. I loved hearing your thoughts on the book. And then the next message is from Laura, also in Italy. So thank you to our Italian readers this month. So let's hear Laura's message.
Hello Miranda, hello Donna, this is Laura from Italy. Bookworm was an enchanting read to me, and it really helped me reflect on the origin of my love of reading. I remember the magic of reading my first real book all on my own. It was a simplified version of Tom Kitten by Beatrice Potter, or the joy I felt when I received a book as a birthday present or at Christmas. It was like welcoming a new friend. I had not heard of many books mentioned by the author, probably because when I was a child they hadn't been translated into Italian. But I have made a long list of titles to explore, and I can't wait to read them. I have filled my commonplace book with quotes from Bookworm. Probably my favorite one is in chapter 10. A book belongs as much to the reader as to the author. And this month's choice of the Comfort Book Club has already taken a special place in my library and in my heart.
Oh, thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Laura. I feel the same way about how it just creeps into your heart when you hear what someone else has to say.
Yes, I know.
about a
And I
favourite
love
book.
that you wrote quotes into your commonplace
Yes,
book
how lovely.
from Bookworm. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And thank you to everyone who read along with us this
Yes.
month. I'd love to hear what a book from your childhood is that you remember. It's so interesting to hear about the books that people really do remember from their childhood.
Yes,
So
it's fascinating.
I'd love to know of a childhood book that you still love. And yes, thank you for reading. Next month we are actually reading a children's book, The Star That Always Stays by Anna Rose Johnson. So looking forward to that comfort read, and hope you'll be reading along with us too. But thank you so much for watching. Extra big thanks to those of you who pressed the super thanks button on my last video. I so appreciate your support. But thank you to everyone who supports my channel by subscribing to it, watching the videos and liking and commenting on them. I really appreciate all of your support, and I hope you have a wonderful week ahead. I'll see you again on Thursday. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.